Okay, I'm seeing 12 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody, to How to Tuesday Open Educational Resources. Thank you all for joining us today. How to Tuesday is our weekly webinar series where we give you 30-minute bites of information from departments all across campus to help students and faculty succeed during their time here. My name is Claire Reinert. I'm your teaching and learning librarian. And we are joined today by Rose Adams, also from the library, who's going to talk to us about open educational resources. We'll be putting a recording of this webinar on our website so you can watch it later. We are excited to have Rose with us today, and I'll go ahead and turn it over.
Hello. I'm so excited to talk today. Thanks for joining me. As Claire introduced me so graciously, I'm Rose Adams. I'm your digital initiatives librarian here at Park. I'd like to apologize beforehand. I'm starting, I think, to lose my voice. I might have to mute to cough a little bit. Please forgive me. Um, or not mute and forget to mute. Uh, so today's session is about open educational resources, or OERs, as you may have heard them called. And I'm particularly excited to be sharing on this topic because I think it can really easily be dismissed as a kind of like dry or boring topic, but really OERs and open education in general are rooted in just the best and most interesting pieces of education, um, as I see it, which are like curiosity and learning and sharing ideas. So hopefully I'll be able to share some of my enthusiasm with you today. My goal is to give you a clear understanding of what OERs are, why they matter, and how they can empower both faculty and students here at Park. So now, before we dig in, I'd like to acknowledge that some of you might be learning about OERs for the first time today, and some of you might find this more of like a bit of a refresher. So I purposefully kind of steered away from some more common talking points with OERs because I would like to use this time as best possible, but I also um, would like this to be an accessible experience for you if this is the first time you've ever heard of an OER. Um, so, excuse me. While our discussion today will be like a little more of an introduction and how OERs can benefit Park, I welcome to and encourage you to type in the chat if you have any questions or if you have more experience with OER usage and you'd like to share your own thoughts and experiences with OERs. I have a few questions that I'll be asking throughout our time today. You don't have to answer them if you don't want to, but they're just like hopefully little check-ins for engagement if you would like to, if you'd like an anchor, if you will. Um, so let's see. So like, especially if you're a faculty member here at Park, please reach out to me through email if you're interested in talking more. My contact info is on the screen below. I can paste it in the chat later. I lead OER initiatives here at Park and I support them here at the library and I lead support for faculty here at the library, I mean. And I'm very happy and excited to talk more at length about it and all the facets of OERs and about how the library can support your exploration on the topic. So when in doubt, please always email me. I'm so happy to talk with you, excuse me. So without further ado, if I can get my notes to listen to me, thank you. So as we get started, if you'd indulge me, if you could drop in the chat the first word or phrase that comes to mind when you hear the term open educational resources. So what does that mean for you at first glance? I'm seeing free. That's pretty, standard. So that's a really, oh, textbooks, legal, student-centered. Nola, I love that. Um, these are all really good words. I love student-centered. Free is an interesting word because we can use free to mean different things. And that's a really good metaphor, I think, for OERs. Um, So at their core, OERs are teaching, learning, and research materials that are free to use and openly accessed. I just realized I was supposed to be moving forward on my slides. I hope you didn't miss much. Let's see. What are OERs? We already, there we go. That's where we want to be. Um, so OERs are teaching, learning, and research materials that are used to, that are free to use and openly licensed. So they can be literally any form of media that promotes instruction and education and learning. Excuse me. Think like textbooks, yes, videos too, though, problem sets, lab manuals, or even like just entire courses. If you're faculty here or if you've had experience designing course material and full courses and teaching with Canvas, you might be familiar with Canvas Commons, which is a great example of courses as an OER. So these are different from traditionally published educational resources because they're created to prioritize access. These resources are by nature an invitation to participate in the content they cover, and to really like I liked the little open sign while I was making this presentation on Canva. Come in, we're open. That's the vibe. The vibe is this is for everyone, and you are welcome here. Last week, our wonderful outreach specialist, Finn, talked a little bit about open source software, which is kind of like where OERs really got their start is in the software world. It's the same concept here. So, excuse me. OERs were actually modeled after the concept of open source software and the initiative to prioritize learning and creating as a collaborative process rather than this like opaque thing that you just accept and consume. What makes OERs different from just being like free online is that they're openly licensed, usually with a Creative Commons license. So you're able to access them, but you are also free to adapt, remix, and share them. So have you ever used a free online resource like a video or an article or a worksheet in your teaching or as a student that you are aware was an OER? And if so, was it like a positive experience for you? Was it neutral? Was it negative? That can also just be something you think about. You don't have to share it with me. Um, but let's see. So we talked about Creative Commons and we talked about access a little bit. So to understand what open really means, it helps to think about the 5 R's of open. So these are kind of like a quick guide that people who interact with and work on OERs think about as a way to like center access. So let's see. There she is. So our first R is retain. So this means to keep a copy of the resource forever. An example of this would be like downloading an open textbook PDF and keeping it even after a course ends. That's just yours, right? So not alternatively exactly, but like in relation to with our wonderful new first day access model, students are able to access their course materials immediately without having to go out like hunting for them. And it's an awesome opportunity for sure. Like we love that. Yes, please. We want to increase that access and we want to make it a day one thing. But when the course is over, they lose access to that resource. So this isn't usually a problem for like particular kinds of content, especially like maybe more introductory stuff that's more like problem sets, things like that maybe. But as you progress in your degree, and especially as you dip into graduate school, you end up finding and using materials that you want to be able to keep and refer back to and, and build on as you learn and start to participate in the conversation in your discipline. So a great way for faculty to supplement this model is with OERs, particularly with resource types that core concepts will need to be referred back to with. I'm trying to decide if that sentence makes sense. Hopefully you're with me. you can download like that resource, that open resource, and you can save it somewhere just for you. And you can print it off without worrying about page number restrictions. It's yours to use, it's your students to use. There's no time limit. And speaking of use, that brings us to our second R, which is reuse. Reuse meaning use the content in like a wide range of ways. So, for example, posting a chapter from an OER textbook in your course site or printing sections for students. It can mean sharing it in a Google folder, even like with your colleagues. Any of that would be considered reuse. Our third R stands for revise, meaning to adapt, adjust, or modify the content. So, for example, updating an OER case study with more like current examples or local data. This has been this is probably the R that like we think of the least, I feel like with OERs, where when instructors are looking for OERs for their courses or like exploring them, they find a resource that's kind of like that feels unfinished to them, that like they'll find something and they'll be like, it would just be a little bit better if it had this. Guess what? You can do that. You can just change it if you want to, depending on the CC license, which we'll talk about in a second. But revision. Yeah, we were talking about revision. So next we have remix, which is slightly similar, but not quite. So combine OERs with other new or different material to create something new. So for example, taking an open statistics book and then combining it with your own practice problems and examples. I know sometimes faculty members find textbooks that have like different authors to different chapters, and each author will approach a concept just a slightly different way that like it's just a little incongruent, and it kind of throws off how they want to teach their students. A remix of that would be pulling out the problems that you like and the styles that you like and adding your own styles to it that would make it more cohesive for the students you're working with. And then finally, last but certainly not least, we have redistribute, which is kind of like the bow on the package, if you will. So sharing your new version with others. For example, uploading your customized course pack or like translated OERs or other resources so that faculty and students can benefit from it. I've heard faculty at Park talk about how they wish when they started they'd had like a little bit more of a foundation that they could track with, like to see what people had done before them in their position. OERs are kind of like inherently built for that. So you can see the footprint of progress in them, which is really cool. And I think really speaks to just like that iterative and inclusive concept of education and learning. So these 5 Rs are a way to articulate that OERs are more than just a free resource, right? So they're about ownership and control and creativity, in comparison with traditional textbooks, which are published and created and distributed traditionally and use traditional copyright that's designed more to protect intellectual property, which, to be very clear, is important and necessary. Like that system exists for a reason. But OERs are designed on a model that like makes it as easy as possible for you to take ownership of your education and to participate in consuming and sharing those ideas. I know engagement is a really hard conversation right now to have with students. It's hard. It's just hard to be a person right now. And being engaged in your coursework can take a lot of effort, and being the person who's engaging students can take a lot of effort. And OERs have some creative solutions for that you can like just have in your arsenal, you know? So now that you've seen these or have maybe been like refreshed on the 5 Rs, something that might be nice for you to think about is which of these 5 Rs, retain, reuse, revise, remix, redistribute, do you think would make like the biggest difference in your own teaching or learning? Like what gaps do you think each of these could fill to make your life easier? You can feel free to share your answer in the chat. You can email me if you want to. I would love to hear. Or you can just think about it for yourself. A little beat, give my voice a break. Oh. It won't let me. Hello? There we go. Remixing for research handouts. Claire, that's a great idea. Love it.
I love to borrow from, I like to sort of pull bits and pieces from other libraries and other people who have those OERs out there.
And then, I mean, that's the point of research, right? It's not to like start from scratch and make something brand new. Like you're building on information and sharing ideas and creating something new with that. That's super exciting. Okay, so we've talked about our 5 Rs. Um, OERs have a lot of differences from traditional publishing, but how do we know what an OER is, right? How do we find identity in them? Like, or not identity, sorry. How do we identify them? How do we figure out what is an OER? What gives us permission to interact with resources that we find as if they're OERs? That's a great question, I will tell you. This is where a lot of people get hung up and overwhelmed. We're so used to operating in the world of traditional publishing and traditional copyright that it can get a little scary to operate in this world where you're like, what do you mean I can just take that and print it off and I don't have to feel guilty about it? So let's start with the where. The answer is that there's not one specific place to find OERs, which you may have already, I mean, it's everywhere. Because of their accessible nature, people who publish OERs have all kinds of different creative solutions and ways of collecting and dispersing and preserving OER content. Partially due to like ability and like needing to find some creative options, and also partially because OERs are meant to be adapted to specific needs. So sharing them would also fall under meeting specific needs, right? So there isn't exactly a rule about where and how you can disperse or publish OERs. A lot of academic institutions have like repositories where people can submit and find OERs. Quite a few people will create YouTube channels and post videos and then license them with a Creative Commons license, which we'll talk about in a second. I think I've said that about 3 times. I'm just baiting you. So more well-known databases are repositories for discovering OERs. They're up here they should be up here on the screen. Yeah, okay. So these are like kind of like the top 4, the big 4 that you'll hear about the most. OER Commons is probably the one you've heard of at least fleetingly. That's kind of good for like just general, pretty much anything goes in OER Commons. OpenStax and Open Textbook Library are 2 that are specifically for textbooks. Then we have like Merlot is great for like arts and history, especially OERs. And then we have Creative Commons Research, which is, as you would guess, related to our Creative Commons licenses. This is like licensed materials that you can use in creation of your own OERs. It has, I think, more components of OERs that you can use for customization. Might have some larger items as well. So, Creative Commons, we mentioned that before. What's that? Let me know in the chat if you've heard of Creative Commons before, or if you have any specific questions that you'd like us to try to like dig into. I'd be so happy to. But I'm just going to keep talking while you think. So Creative Commons licenses are what make OERs possible. The way traditional copyright works is that it's sort of implied, right? So the rule is that you have to publish a unique work in some form of physical medium. That's how you get copyright. You don't have to register it anywhere. You don't have to do anything to it. It just belongs to you. It's yours because you made it. And that's, I think, cool and kind of poetic in a way. But I might be thinking about that too hard. So that's your ID right, and it's protected by copyright. You have no obligation to put that little copyright symbol. You don't have to register it anywhere. It's yours. The distinguishing factor when we're looking at open educational resources is to search for explicit permission on resources that the creator has given permission for you to use and how they are comfortable with you using it. So that's how you know it's an OER is somebody has explicitly said, usually with a Creative Commons license, I made this for you to use. Now, there are practical limitations to sharing ideas, right? What I mean by that is excuse me, there are different kinds of information that need to be like protected. For example, especially when we work with like raw data. Data is information about people, and sometimes it's sensitive information about people. Um, there are different ideas that are for some reason or another not totally remixable. And on top of that, creators and authors might just not be comfortable with giving you free reign over something they worked really hard on, which is totally understandable. Um, and they just might want to share things in an open way, but they want to set boundaries around it, um, while still preserving access to it. So when you create an OER, you can use a Creative Commons license, of which there are 6 types, to be specific about what you're giving others permission to do with this resource, right? So you can specify permission to use it, but not change it. You can specify, so like the most common one would be a CC BY, which is just use it as much as you want, but give me credit, pretty please. There's also our CC BY in C, I think, is the one where there are a few where you can use this and you can change it as much as you want, as long as you don't traditionally publish this and remove the open access concept of it, right? It's kind of like preserving the legacy of the resource or its origins. But there is, from what I know about Creative Commons licenses, there is typically one that can fit those like specific boundary needs for almost any condition, and any specific need in terms of like preserving access without deteriorating like privacy needs and things like that. So when people talk about OERs, speaking of access, the first thing that usually comes up is textbook costs. You've probably heard, at least at some point, how hindering textbook costs are to a student's educational experience, right? And honestly, that makes a lot of sense. Textbooks are expensive, and that cost can be like just a huge barrier for students. We adopted our first day access model because students were not able to purchase their textbooks before the first day of classes. And first day access was a solution that we found so that students could use financial aid to pay for the resources and have it on day one, which is a good solution. And that means like some students are already behind before the class even gets rolling if they don't have that resource, right? But here's the thing, access isn't just about money, right? Money is a barrier to access, or lack of money is a barrier to access. Access is the thing that we're trying to preserve, right? So our classrooms at Park are full of students from different backgrounds, right? With different life experiences and with different ways of learning. And like a single commercial textbook isn't going to fit their needs, especially when we have so many different like cultural perspectives coming in. We have so many students who are maybe not necessarily thinking about staying in the US after they've gotten to their degree. They want to take what they've learned back to their home countries. And a traditionally like just straightforward textbook is not always the best resource to meet those unique needs, right? I deviated from my notes and now I'm not sure. Anyway, so here's the thing. Let's see. That's where OERs stand out, right? There's my little pitch. Because they're open, faculty can tweak and update them. You can lead, you can add like local examples, highlight voices that aren't like usually included, or like you can swap out case studies that feel outdated. You can also reformat for accessibility, whether that's like making sure screen readers can handle the text, adding captions, or offering material in different formats. With this like subscription culture that is gripping us by the throat, forgive the analogy, I feel you may have noticed, I've noticed where like you can buy the ebook version of something and then you still have to buy the audiobook version of something. And I don't like that. I think that's silly. But I understand, like, I mean, I guess audiobook narrators are creating something and they deserve to be compensated for it, of course. But with OERs, you don't have to think about those layers of access. The thing is just yours, and typically it comes with all the accessories, usually, or it comes with an ability to create the accessories. So those kinds of just changes that aren't possible with standard lockdown textbooks, that is possible with OERs. So yes, OERs do save money, but, and that is important, 100% that's important. That is probably for a good reason the first talking point that you hear. But they also make it easier to build classrooms that are more inclusive and flexible and responsive to who our students actually are, which is the bread and butter, right? That's why we're here. Top five of why we're here. I'll take debates. Come talk to me in the chat. Um, so think about like your own experience as a student. Did you ever like run into an issue with a textbook or a course resource that made it harder for you? It doesn't necessarily have to be that you couldn't afford the book, or any other elements of it, like either harder to connect with the content or harder to consume the material at all, anything that prevented your ability to really get the most out of that resource and out of that class. Just something to think about. Let's see. What are we? Okay, I have like a little extra spiel, but to be honest, I really like to keep a little bit of time for questions if you have them. I do want to plug the library again. So we've talked a lot about why OERs are great for access. That doesn't necessarily mean that you feel ready to jump in, but the library is here to help you. Librarians, the spirit of librarianship is inherently about access. This is kind of our bread and butter. And particularly mine here at Park, this is kind of my role. So if you are at all curious, if you have any questions, if you just want to brainstorm and talk my ear off or like vent about how great OER resources are, I would be absolutely overjoyed to talk to you however you would be comfortable to talk, and explore any option that you'd like to. So that's my plug. I have, let's see. Oops. Well, uh, my email is down in the bottom corner. I can put it in the chat here. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
So I had one, I guess. What does the process look like if you want to revise or change something about an OER? Is it like a Word document that you can go in and like take it out, or am I oversimplifying?
So that depends on the resource. There's not like a specific structure, right, of how
Sure.
you publish or how you like distribute OERs. Google Docs and Google Drive are a very common way to
Mhm.
share and distribute OERs. That when you're creating an OER, that is something that you will want to keep in mind. If you're licensing a material that you want someone to be able to just like mix and match, change however they want to, um, making sure it's published in a format that makes that possible is something that you'll want to think about. Um, I'm trying to in my head, I have like an image of like someone just going like taking a print book and going, here, you can use this to tear it up however you want. You could theoretically do that, but that would probably be kind of frustrating to revise and um, maybe not in the full spirit of access. I'm just like trying to imagine typing
Yeah.
out verbatim like a monk in a monastery, like the entire book. That's why
Sure.
OERs are typically digital, in their core, like at their there are options typically to buy open resource textbooks for like a much lower fee, you know. But for the
Mhm.
most part, OERs are typically digital so that you can do that. Does that answer? Sort of?
Yes, that does.
Yeah.
So, okay, I am gonna go ahead and wrap it up. But again, Rose dropped her email in the chat, so please feel free to reach out to her if you have any kinds of questions or if you just want to learn more about OERs. She is here for that. I also want to thank Rose for powering through her cold, her throat mischief. I want to thank you for powering through that and for joining us today so that we could learn more about OERs, which is such a cool topic. So
Thanks for letting
again,
me nerd out.
yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to let you nerd out about anything, anytime. So again, How To Tuesday is our weekly webinar series. So I will see you all next week at noon, same time, same place, to meet our new English language learning coordinator. Information for registering that will go out next week, and I will see you all then. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions for me.